Our commitment to this historic alliance with the courageous people of South Korea has never been stronger.
Vice President Mike Pence in South Korea today, reinforcing the Trump administration's strong support for that country and opposition to North Korea, whose latest missile launch failed.
No more secrets, no more lies.
Tax Day protests greet the president in Palm Beach. We will take you there live.
They asked, who shot him? And that's when the leader said, I shot him.
The shooting in North Miami of an unarmed behavioral therapist made national news. Now that police officer faces criminal charges, we'll take it to the Roundtable.
Good morning. Happy Easter to those celebrating today. We are grateful you are here with us.
And happy Passover as well. We have a jam-packed show for you today, beginning with events developing around the world and here at home. North Korea conducted a missile launch over the objections of its neighbors and the U.S. Though it failed, dictator Kim Jong-un basically thumbed his nose at President Trump. The president is back on Twitter this morning defending his about-face on China, which he now considers an ally against North Korea.
The president is at Mar-a-Lago again this weekend and this morning attending Easter services. The Trump family has arrived at Bethesda by the Sea Church, and Ian Margol is there, and he joins us right now live. Ian, good morning.
Good morning, Glenna. Good morning, Michael. Yeah, he arrived about 35 minutes ago with his motorcade. There were dozens of people out here to see him. In fact, we sent some video back of that motorcade arriving. He is here with his daughter, Tiffany, his son, Barron, the First Lady, and her parents. He did step out for just a moment to wave to all of the people that were here, but that was a quick wave, and then they worked their way into the side entrance. Now, although he got here right before that 11 o'clock service started, we know he's been up for a little while because he was on Twitter this morning saying, quote, I did what was an almost impossible thing to do for a Republican, easily won the Electoral College. Now tax returns are brought up again. Someone should look into who paid for the small organized rally yesterday. The election is over. Of course, he is talking about the protests that happened around the country, those tax marches, demonstrators demanding his tax returns be released. Some of those protests happening down in South Florida, from Miami to Hollywood and right here in Palm Beach. Now, of course, they were asking for those to be released, saying that they would give people a better insight into his business inquiries as well. Now, just one more note about this church. They are in here for this Easter service. This is the same church where he and the First Lady were married in 2005. Michael, Glenna.
Ian, many thanks. We'll see you later in our newscast. Well, when it comes to the U.S. military action, President Trump made some big moves in the last 2 weeks, and he got bipartisan support from South Florida lawmakers, although they do say he must get authorization from Congress before he does anything more militarily.
South Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo, a Republican, and Ted Deutsch, a Democrat, joined us in the studio Friday to talk about that and a lot more, including one of South Florida's biggest issues, health insurance.
Congressman, we all know the world has always been a dangerous place, but in the last week or two, it seems to have grown exponentially more dangerous. We have Tomahawk missiles going into Syria. We explode a Moab, this huge bomb in Afghanistan, and Kim Jong-un is making angry sounds in North Korea. Congressman Deutsch, what do you make of this, and is the world more dangerous?
Well, the world has always been dangerous, and the use by Assad of chemical weapons that prompted the response by the administration just reminds us of the Civil War, in which he's killed over 400,000 of his own people. And when you look at that attack, the missile attack in Syria in response to the chemical attack, and the dropping of this massive bomb on ISIS in Afghanistan, and the concerns about North Korea, you realize Congress has been left out, and Congress has a responsibility, I think I think we ought to be back in session next week to debate an authorization to use military force so that it's clear not just what the president's goals are militarily, but what limits, what constraints Congress should be placing upon him. Right. We should be doing that on behalf of the American people. You're
still working off the authorization from 9/11.
Right.
I mean, that's the last time Congress weighed in.
And Michael, I agree. I'm a co-sponsor to an authorization of use for military force specifically to address the Islamic State, ISIS, and I think we should also authorize the use of force in Syria. I think a lot of Republicans and Democrats came together last week to say, yes, we agree. Assad cannot proceed with impunity. For years, he's been gassing innocent people to death, children. That cannot be allowed to happen in the year 2017 in what we would like to think of as a civilized world. I think the Congress just needs to make it official that we are at war with the Islamic State and that we need to win that war, and also that we're not going to tolerate Bashar al-Assad or really any UN recognized leader to gas innocent people to death.
But wouldn't there need to be, though, before, when Congress authorizes a policy, what is the policy? Because the airstrikes on Syria seem to be a gut reaction to what the president saw, the babies. And right now, as Ileana Ross-Layton and I had a conversation, and she supports the use of force, but says that there is no appetite in the U.S. right now for another war. Would you support that?
I think she's right. She's absolutely right. And what's been missing here is, as you point out, a discussion about the president's policy here. It's not clear at all, other than, in this case, the fact that he saw the same horrific images that we all saw, and that prompted this military strike. It's not clear what the policy is, what the goal is. Congress has to come together to agree on not just the need to take action to defeat ISIS, but on what limitations we need to have in place so that we don't find ourselves in another ground war in the Middle East.
But I will say, Glenna, the President of the United States, no President of the United States, needs to seek authorization to respond to world emergencies. I would argue that what we saw in Syria was a world emergency. I think President Obama should have done what President Trump did 4 years ago. If there's going to be an extended campaign, absolutely, presidents have to go to Congress. But chemical weapons were used in a country where U.S. troops are present. Innocent people, including children, were gassed to death. An immediate response was required. I am glad that the administration didn't dither and wait, as the previous administration did in 2013, arguing that they needed to seek authorization from Congress when they didn't for that immediate first response.
Would you support regime change and using force for regime change?
I believe that the United States position should be that Bashar al-Assad has no future in Syria.
Now,
does that mean that we invade Syria? Does that mean that we are going to launch a campaign, a military campaign to remove him? No, but it means that we continue pressuring our allies, the rest of the world, through sanctions to remove Assad from power. He is the most evil person in the world right now. He is the greatest terrorist in the world right now, and he should not be leading any country.
I would just say that when Assad killed close to 1,500 people, when he gassed close to 1,500 people 4 years ago, as someone who strongly believed that there should have been a response then, the president came to Congress, and I couldn't find a majority of my Republican colleagues or Democratic colleagues to support the effort, though I thought it would have been appropriate, and I think it's appropriate now. But what we can't have is a situation where the president is making foreign policy decisions based on the latest segment on Fox News. That's not in the best interest of our country.
Right. Well, vis-a-vis of what Congressman Curbelo just said, this week we all know Rex Tillerson was in Moscow. He sat down for a couple of hours of Vladimir Putin, and presumably one of the things he said was, you have to withdraw your support of Bashar al-Assad, and Putin apparently said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. So without Russia changing its position, I mean, what leverage do we have to move in or to take Assad out?
I hope this administration finally understands that we cannot count on the Russians. It's actually kind of unfortunate. We've had now 3 presidents in a row in this country believe that Vladimir Putin can somehow be trusted. President Bush at one point said that he looked into his soul and he could trust him. President Obama outsourced the Syria situation to Vladimir Putin. That hasn't worked out. And this administration, President Trump, during the campaign said that he thought we could work with Russia. Right. The Russians are not our friends. We need to put pressure on them to do the right thing. We can never just trust them.
Russia has stood by, not only just stood by, they've enabled Assad to slaughter hundreds of thousands of his own people, even as Iran has expanded its influence in Syria and Hezbollah has expanded its influence on the ground. I agree, we can't rely on Russia, but we have to be firm with Russia. And I will say that after months and months of statements from first candidate Trump and then President Trump about why it's so important for us to have a great relationship with Russia, I think there's finally a realization, as Carlos points out, that it's not about a relationship, that we have to recognize who we're dealing with in Putin and we have to behave accordingly.
Well, I think the administration sent a very strong message by dropping this 21,000-pound, the most powerful non-nuclear weapon in our arsenal in Afghanistan. I mean, it did send a message to Islamic State and killed maybe 3 dozen of their fighters, but it sent a stronger message to people like Kim Jong-un in North Korea.
Look, I do believe in peace through strength, Michael, and of course we have to be measured, and we don't want to launch new wars, because that's just not the way to do things in the world. However, we do need to send a strong message that groups like ISIS are not going to be able to proceed with impunity. ISIS has been operating in the Kandahar province in Afghanistan for a long time now. I visited Afghanistan at the beginning of last year, and the generals there were very concerned. And I do support the sending of these strong and clear messages that the United States is going to lead in the world in a smart way, in a restrained way, but that we are not going to simply sit back and watch as the world burns.
Nor will we send American troops into another long ground war in the Middle East. That's what we're balancing here. Yes, it's important that we stand up and we fight ISIS and we do everything we can to keep our country safe, but it doesn't mean getting embroiled in another long ground war, which the American people, I'm quite confident, have no interest in pursuing.
The polls indicate that, certainly. All right, everybody hold your thoughts, Congressman. We will be back with Ted Deutsch and Carlos Curbelo in just a minute. Welcome back. In our studio this morning are Congressman Carlos Curbelo of Southwest Miami-Dade and Representative Ted Deutsch from Boca Raton. His district stretches from South Palm Beach County all the way down to Fort Lauderdale. Congressman Deutsch, you issued a strong statement this week condemning Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, after he said during a press briefing that Hitler had not gassed his own people, and that he wasn't in that respect as bad as Assad. But of course, he ignored completely the history of the Holocaust. He said later, "I'm sorry, but this was a gaffe, a monumental mistake."
It showed such an incredible lack of understanding of world history. It showed such disrespect for what happened in the Holocaust. And it happened at a time when Holocaust survivors and other Jews were coming together to celebrate Passover. It really was stunning. What's so upsetting about the kinds of statements like that from Sean Spicer is the unwillingness to simply apologize. Remember, Sean Spicer was criticized in response to criticism from me and others on International Holocaust Remembrance Day,
for when their
statement didn't mention Jews, which was outrageous. His response then was to call those of us who were critical of that omission pathetic. Well, it was pathetic to see him make the statement about Hitler. It was equally troubling for him to then go on and acknowledge, well, no, there were these Holocaust centers where Hitler brought. They were concentration camps where Hitler brought Jews, 6 million Jews, that the Nazis killed and slaughtered. And I don't understand how it is that he can make gaffes like that. I'd say one last thing, though. This administration, unfortunately, has not responded well whenever it's been suggested that there are things that are said or unsaid that seem to play into the hands of white supremacists and extremists. That's concerning. Just yesterday, we learned that the White House intends to close up the office of the special envoy, the State Department special envoy, to fight anti-Semitism. All of that in a row just raises really profound concerns, and it's troubling and it's unacceptable, frankly.
This week, spring break, Congressman, a lot of your counterparts are holding town hall meetings and once again taking a beating over the Affordable Health Care Act and people who are just so worried about what's going to happen. So putting aside the past couple of months and going forward, what is going to happen? Where is national health care going? And Congressman Curbelo, you have a lot of constituents in your district, I think you both do, who rely on the Affordable Care Act and wonder what's going to happen. Is it in a death spiral? What comes next?
Well, in terms of what's going to happen in Congress, I think that's still an open question. Speaker Ryan in the House continues to try to build consensus among House Republicans, and that has been elusive up to this point. My view is the following. I think we can do a lot better than our current healthcare system. So what I think we should do is keep the good in the ACA, make sure we continue covering people with pre-existing conditions, let young people stay on their parents' plans, prohibit the gender rating, meaning we don't discriminate against women in issuing health insurance policies, and eliminating lifetime caps, meaning there's no cap on how much we spend on any individual's health care. So keep all of that and then reform the system so that it works better. The current system is failing in many ways. I'll give you an example. Monroe County in my district, there's only one insurance provider left there. Every year we see that the insurance companies either leave the markets or file for higher premiums. So how can we introduce a market element into the healthcare system, empower consumers so that they can take control of their own healthcare and become the government's allies, and really all of our allies, in actually reducing or containing the cost of healthcare? That is the solution that we're in search of. We have this idea of providing people with tax credits, opposed to the ACA, which essentially threatens people into buying health insurance with government penalties and fees. The tax credit seeks to empower the consumer, say, here, take these funds and go out into the market and buy the health insurance that's best for you and for your family. I think that's a worthwhile idea. That's what the AHCA is premised upon.
But to do this, don't you need to bring in the Democrats? Shouldn't this be a bipartisan process?
Well, I've made clear.
You think so?
I am I am ready, willing, and able to sit down to talk about exactly this issue. How do we provide more competition? How do we ensure that there are more providers so that we can cover more people and bring down costs? That's what we ought to be doing. Instead, the piece of legislation, this Trump Care bill that almost came to the House floor but didn't because it would have failed miserably, went exactly the opposite direction. It would have meant that 24 million people would have lost insurance. It would have meant that the basic essential benefits in the Affordable Care Act would have gone away. Maternity care and pediatric care and emergency room care would have been wiped away. And the idea that we're now looking at a proposal that, the latest proposal, at least as I've read about it, suggests that the bar on pre-existing conditions is going to go away as well. Changing the Affordable Care Act to kick millions of people off of their health insurance and to drive up costs and to raise prices by putting in this age tax, which the last bill would have done, is the wrong direction. It's a huge step backward in healthcare, and I don't understand why we're not able to come together to acknowledge that the Affordable Care Act has been successful and then build upon it.
I'll add briefly, the bill needed work. I was involved in many negotiations and discussions to strengthen that tax credit to make sure more people got covered. But what we need to do, Michael, Glenna, is make sure that people not only have health insurance, but that health insurance actually gives them access to health care. There are a lot of people today who check the box, have health insurance, and not pay the government fine, yet when they have to go have surgery, their deductible is $5,000, $6,000, and they really don't have health care.
I would agree with Carlos that it is about ensuring that the insurance policy that someone buys actually insures them when they get sick. It's about making sure that there is basic coverage for everyone. And my hope is that if in order to attract the Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party, it means doing away with all of the essential health benefits that are now part of every policy because of the Affordable Care Act.
No.
That Carlos
many
will
of us
oppose
won't
that.
support that.
Right,
So.
I'm thrilled to hear
let
that.
me jump in here, Congressman Curbelo. The White House is sending mixed signals on all kinds of issues, including on health care. On Monday, Health and Human Services said, we are going to continue the subsidies to the millions of poor Americans who would not have any policy without the subsidies. And then on Thursday, President Trump in an interview said, no, I'm going to end those subsidies to force the Democrats to come to the table. I don't think that's going to force you to come to the table to negotiate, is it?
Think about, I'm glad you brought that up. Think about that proposal from the President of the United States. In order to advance what he believes is in his political interest, he has made clear that the way that he thinks that he needs to do that is to cut health care out from under the most vulnerable Americans. Is that going to cause me to act? It is. It's going to cause me to stand up and defend the Affordable Care Act and the coverage that it provides to people. It's not going to get me to go along with this dangerous proposal. But that's not
something that you can live with either.
Not at all, and many Republicans are already on the record supporting funding for cost-sharing reductions, which is what we're talking about here, the support for the lowest income Americans on deductibles, on premiums, so that they can have access to health care.
Well, gentlemen,
thank you.
Great to have you come in, and we wish you happy Passover, happy Easter,
and holiday weekend,
and a great holiday weekend.
And next, we take it all to the Roundtable. Stay with us.
It is that time once again that we love and we wait for when we take a more analytical, closer look at the week's top news stories with our Powerhouse Roundtable.
And this Easter morning, we have a great one for you. Introductions first. Melba Pearson is the Deputy Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida. She used to work at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. Mary Lee Cancio is a Miami-based attorney and an activist in the Republican Party. Mark Caputo is a correspondent for Politico and writes the daily Politico Florida Playbook. And everyone is ready to a little rumbling this morning? a little bit.
If we can, I want to begin by asking each of you about this extraordinary moment that we have seen, which has taken on a life of its own with Dr. David Dow being dragged off this United Airlines flight. Every time I see this video, Melba, I just kind of reel back and think to myself, how could they have done this? How could the police officer have followed some order to take somebody who has not committed a criminal act, drag him off the plane like this? How could a great American corporation allow this to happen? What are your thoughts?
You know, I viewed the video and much like everyone else found it very, very troubling. But also what I found troubling was, what do we use our police officers for? Because police officers are supposed to enforce criminal codes and intervene when there's a criminal act. This is a civil dispute. Basically, United said, can you give up your seat? And he said, no, that's not a crime.
He was sanctioned for it, I think, the police officer, right? Wasn't he sanctioned?
Correct.
He's been suspended.
But you know, what was so troubling about that whole thing in the days to follow is that United and all airlines have this, we can oversell, we can treat our customers that way, and we've sort of accepted that, mostly because of the security issues with airlines, we've accepted that airlines can just treat us poorly.
Well, that happened to me last time I went to D.C. I changed flights, I had paid for a first-class ticket, and when I got to the airport, they gave me my ticket, and they called me and they said, oh, we need your ticket back, and they pulled it from me, and they said, well, somebody else has higher priority than you, so we gave it to them. I just wanted to get home.
So you flew coach or
I flew coach in a middle seat in the back, but I just wanted to come home in that earlier flight, so it happened. So in addition to a red eye, now they have black eye flights too.
Mark, let me trot out a theory on you. I think that part of the reason that we all have reacted the way we have to this is that we often kind of feel subliminally that we are pawns in the game, and that even if we play by the rules, something terrible and capricious can happen. And that seems to be exactly what's happened.
Newsflash, corporate America doesn't care about you, and the police state doesn't either. And now we have the perfect wedding of the two, along with the Orwellian stupidity of actually seating a man. At least in your case, they didn't seat you and then force you off the plane.
Yes.
It's just...
That was the biggest mistake.
Right, and I think what Glenna was saying is true, is that we're used to airlines treating us this way, but in part because who really wants to get on a metal tube a missile with wings and then go somewhere. They know that you're there because you have to be. That's the reason that a round trip ticket to Tallahassee, for instance, costs $740. It's almost cheaper to fly to Rome from Miami than Tallahassee.
You know,
it's just
or Reykjavik now.
They do what they do because they can.
But you know, and I think if they had explained that they needed 4 seats for a sick mother, for a veteran, or for someone, but they needed 4 seats for their own crew.
Right.
And I think that's why some people said, no, I'm not giving up my seat.
Well, but the key here is all they needed to do, first of all, the officer shouldn't have dragged him off the plane the way he did. But secondly, all he had to say was, hey, United, ask the guy or the girl next to Dr. Dow. He doesn't want to give up his seat for $1,000. I'll give you $2,000. Right. Keep upping the price until somebody walks on.
And that's what they did. They only did $800. Every time I'm offered that on a flight, I always say, give me a free round trip ticket. I'll be off. But they never do that.
Yeah.
So it's in part they're able to be stingy with us because, again, they can't.
Well, I see now that Delta is going to offer up to $9,800 if you get bumped and don't want to leave. So
time to fly Delta.
And let's see what American does first.
Yeah, we are America's hub, though. So, and I think, didn't America buy United?
I must.
Maybe I screwed that up.
But they'll be able to shortly.
No, we need producer.
Oh,
can we
US
check
Air.
that?
Thank you, US Air.
All right, let's move on to a really, not that Dr. Dow isn't serious, but a really important development this week in Miami-Dade County. State Attorney Catherine Fernandez-Runnel Merrilee charged a police officer, an on-duty police officer with a serious crime, first time in her 24 years in office that she has charged a officer on duty for committing allegedly a criminal act, and this is in the shooting of this autistic schizophrenic man in North Miami about 9 months ago.
All you have to do is show the video. When you see the video, that clearly the man is laying on the ground with his hands up. I mean, he could not have been any more helpless, just that, you know.
And also calling out, this is my patient, I'm a therapist, and he has a toy. He doesn't have a gun.
Who knows what made that cop shoot that person, but clearly.
You know what's so troubling about this whole case is that with nine months of an investigation, Melba, you worked in the state attorney's office prior to this job. You were there when some of this investigation was done. So, you know, you have such perspective on this. Jonathan Alita, the officer, was far away from the scene where 2 officers were much closer and decided not to for the various reasons.
And told them not to.
Yeah. And so what I think the overarching question here is, because of the events, is this a political criminal charge?
And the Dade County PBA says it was political.
Did the state attorney feel compelled to make a case out of Jonathan Alita because of all the others that have gone uncharged?
Well, of course, this is the first time in 20 years that an officer has been charged for shooting in the line of duty. However, I think in this case, you have a video, you have radio transmissions, you have an abundance of evidence that points clearly that this officer exceeded the scope of his duty, and he could have killed 2 people, both of which were helpless. So I think that the charge here was the right decision. I'm glad we're going to have a chance for clear and, we're able to go through the judicial process and have some transparency as to what happened. But we can't just leave it at just charging the officer. We have to do a review of how lethal force is used, how officers are interacting with people with mental and developmental disabilities, and do an overhaul of the standard operating procedures. Because charging an officer is great, but if we don't look at the policies, this will happen again.
Actually, it's not great to charge an officer. It's very sad.
Of course. I don't rejoice in anyone being charged criminally. But the concept is everyone's, oh, wonderful, this officer's been charged. You can't leave it just at that. You have to look and prevent this from ever happening again.
Well, I think that's the advantage of having body cameras. We're talking about this more because there's just more video. More people have the capacity
and audio.
Yeah, they have a capacity to shoot video and to post it online. And I think it's not all police officers, it's very few, but we talk about white privilege, which as a white man, I must admit, I sometimes resent, but it's true. There's police privilege, where we are treated like second-class citizens because they have the guns, and as Mao Zedong told us, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun, and it's time to stop that.
On that note, let's take a quick break. We will be right back in 2 minutes with more. We are back with the Roundtable. We just don't even stop during commercial breaks, but that's okay.
Because we can't stop. We can't stop.
A moment this week when the HUD Secretary, Ben Carson, and erstwhile Florida resident stopped in with Alonzo Mourning, who did a public-private partnership in this public housing, and on his visit and tour got stuck in the elevator. And how ironic to many people, Mary Lee, that moment was, because that HUD budget is about to be cut pretty significantly, and this sort of sometimes is what happens when you don't have enough money in your buildings. Is that a stretch?
You know, I think that he was in town. That's great that he was here in Miami. Secretary DeVos was in Miami.
And everything worked.
The Administrator McMahon was in Miami. So, you know, I think it makes for good conversation.
Well, I mean, and that raises the issue. I love the headline in the Miami Herald after this incident. What do you talk about with Ben Carson in a stuck elevator for 40 minutes? Apparently, they didn't talk about the budget for HUD, which has been cut by something like 17%, and a lot of money for housing projects and affordable workforce housing like he was visiting is going to be gone. Of course, he told the Herald, don't worry about it. Don't believe the budget numbers. We're going to make it work.
Well, that's the ultimate farce of our politics. You see it both at the legislative level, but certainly in Washington. There's the executive proposes and the legislative disposes. The governor, the president in this case, comes up with a budget with all of these cuts so he can make things kind of balance and steer more money to the military. And what you're probably going to find is more status quo, despite what people said when they ran for office.
Well, what Secretary Carson said was, don't worry about the budget for HUD because that housing money is going to be in the big infrastructure package. That's what he said.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I think this sort of served as a reminder of what everyday Americans deal with on a day-to-day basis, right, and that these cuts have impact, and that these cuts will destroy people's lives. So take note and bring that back to Washington.
I work on a building on Brickell Class A, and I've gotten stuck in the elevators, and we have.
I'm sure those elevators are much more lovely than the ones in the,
to your point,
air conditioning, maybe some music.
To your point, then the next stop for the secretary was Liberty Square, which is coming down and is the beginning of an urban renewal. Right. But until now, and still now, there are people and families living in homes with bugs and mold and
our infrastructure is collapsing in this country. What we saw in Atlanta with I-85 collapsing.
Well,
and
Liberty Square Rising is hopeful. Let's see what happens there. If we can, let's talk a little bit about TPS for Haitians. There are 58,000 Haitians in this country, most of them in South Florida, who are under protected status thanks to an executive order from President Obama. And now that's going to expire July 22nd. And Mark, I think the question is, will it be extended? And President Trump has given no indication. This week, I asked Governor Scott, who was in town, do you support extending TPS for Haitians? At first, he gave me a non-committal answer, so I asked him again. Here it is. Okay, here it comes. You have the president's ear. You're friends with him. If you said, Mr. President, please extend TPS for the Haitians, might make a difference.
I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we're continuing to be a very welcoming state for all immigrants. Well, that's about as non-committal as it gets. You're pro-immigrant, but you won't say whether you're going to support TPS for Haitians.
He met with a group of Haitians privately after that interview.
Yes.
And after that interview, what he told them is, look, we can continue to be extending this temporarily, or we can resolve the immigration issue. Put a proposal, send it to the president, and I'll do all I can. And that's basically what we have to do. The Dreamers, they're the same thing. They're in the same position. It's just temporary. We need permanent immigration reform in this country, Michael.
But temporary protected status is for a very specific, either an act of war, earthquake,
or hurricanes in Central America.
And so, and the Central Americans that were victims of a hurricane in the late 90s are still under recurring temporary protected status because of that. So if apples were to apples, why not re-up the TPS for Haitians because of the disrepair in that?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of disingenuousness from the governor saying, oh, put together a proposal, we'll have Congress fix it. Congress cannot fix immigration reform because repeatedly, time and again, they failed to do it. Republicans, by and large, and I don't want to say both sides here, yes, there is some Democratic culpability, because when Barack Obama was president, there was a Democratic House and Senate, he did nothing.
Right.
But since then, Republicans have been by and large complicit in killing immigration reform time and time again. Now you've got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican president, and nothing's being done. They can't even repeal Obamacare, which they ran on repealing.
And I think this is a very key test for an administration that has had some anti-immigration stances. I mean, we saw this week, within the last week, that the president, felt so moved by these pictures of Syrian children, being affected. Well, hopefully that means he will change his stance and be welcoming to the Haitians who have fled tyranny, who have fled cholera disease. When they're repatriated, they are held in prisons with no release date. So they're basically sent back to Haiti to die. There's no infrastructure. So these are all the formula, all the ingredients for a horrible humanitarian situation.
But the Syrian children were not affected. They were gassed, they were murdered, which is completely different than a normal immigrant trying to get to this country.
Well, being repatriated and then dying in prison is basically murder.
I also want to point out that
context.
Last September, President, then candidate Trump, went to Little Haiti. He met with a group of Haitian Americans, promised to support them, went to a rally, which I covered later that day at the Knight Center, and basically said, Haitians are amazing people, I love them, hope they vote for me, and I'm going to help them. Well, here's a chance to
hold him at his word.
To wed what the two of you said is that it's very important to get to President Trump and make that case, and that is going to be incumbent on the leaders in that community or the leaders of our state to make that case.
Right.
One thing I think we should acknowledge, the Associated Press did a fantastic series on the children of Haiti, at least 9 kids being raped by 135 UN peacekeepers. By and large from Sri Lanka, but not only from Sri Lanka. It is just an example of the terrible suffering that the Haitian people overcome or deal with almost on a day-to-day basis. And that story has been under the radar, and we should at least mention it.
It's not the only story under the radar. All the money also the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation received to rebuild Haiti, and where did that money go?
We'll kind of have to interrupt you, but we are out of time. But thank you all for coming in. A lot more to talk about, especially vis-a-vis Haiti. All right, the last of Miami's cocaine cowboys is now in custody, a quarter century since they launched their notorious legend that would become, eventually, Miami Vice. The man that U.S. Marshals call the last of the cocaine cowboys now is in custody.
The closing chapter to the story that started the Miami Vice image. Gus Falcone will be brought to South Florida for prosecution from Central Florida, where he was arrested late this week.
They literally cornered him at an intersection and blocked him in with their vehicles.
Gus Falcone was biking with his wife, hence the shirt in his mugshot. The beginning of the end of 26 years on the lam, U.S. Marshals had discovered his fake Florida driver's license from 1997 under the name Louis Rice. And after a 2013 car wreck, they traced his home to Kissimmee.
We delegated every resource we had to tracking down that address, trying to find out exactly where he was living and bring him back to justice.
I never saw cars come and go. I would barely see them come out.
This 1991 indictment unspools the story of the cocaine cowboys, led by Falcone's brother, Willie Falcone, and his high school buddy, Sal Magluta. 75 tons of cocaine smuggled to the U.S. over 13 years. More than a $2 billion haul in cash and assets, living the high life while Miami deteriorated into violent drug wars. Their eventual road to justice included money laundering, witness murders, jury tampering.
It's a little surreal to be on set as I was yesterday and to get this breaking news.
Filmmaker Billy Corbin has institutional knowledge. His company did the Cocaine Cowboys documentary and is right now shooting a third docuseries, Los Muchachos, about Willie and Sal.
I think when the documentary came out, it not only became kind of a household term, but people also kind of, I think, accepted the thesis of the movie, which is that narco dollars generated in that era helped essentially to build the foundation of Miami as we know it and love it today.
There is a twist in the epilogue. As Falcone's prosecution begins, his brother's comes to an end. Willie Falcone has served 20 years in prison and is scheduled for release this June.
What timing. All right, so to come, my personal perspective about hope and renewal at Easter versus Bashar al-Assad and Kim Jong-un.
Here's a live look now from the Miami Tower Cam, and to go with it, Erica Delgado with your forecast.
Happy Sunday, South Florida. We are dealing with a strong east breeze because of high pressure just off the Carolina coast, continuing to drag in patches of clouds and even isolated showers from time to time, but also leaving us a high risk of rip currents along Atlantic beaches. As far as the highs are concerned today, mid-80s, breezy conditions stick around. We're going to keep the chance of anytime showers in the forecast for the majority of the day because of that strong east flow. And as far as my beachgoers out there, well, because of that strong east wind, that rip current risk will remain high, so stay out of the water and don't forget that sunscreen today.
All right, Erica, thank you. Before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about this period of hope and renewal and rebirth that we get from Easter and Passover. Lord knows we need it now more than ever, but it is hard to feel hopeful when you see suffering and cruelty on the scale we recently saw in Syria. More than 80 people killed by sarin gas dropped by a Syrian Air Force plane at the direction of President Bashar al-Assad. This was an unspeakable atrocity, and President Trump, I think, was right to respond with military force, a one-time response that was supposed to send a message, and the message is the United States will not tolerate such a war crime. We will not sit idly by in the face of terror. And that was also the message sent when the U.S. dropped the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan, killing nearly 100 ISIS fighters. So, on the one hand, we have images of destruction and death and the threat of more in North Korea. At the same time, we have Christians celebrating the miraculous resurrection of Jesus and Jews celebrating the passing over of their homes in Egypt by Pharaoh's hand, saving the Jewish people. These are central moments and tenets in Christianity and Judaism, moments that reassure the faithful that God loves us and will save us if we believe in Him. But belief, oh, it's so hard. Always has been. The assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, as it says in the book of Hebrews. I hope this season of faith is one that reassures your belief in the power of faith, reaffirms your belief in the substance of things not seen. As Martin Luther King once said, the arc of the moral universe is long and it inclines towards justice. That's my perspective for this Sunday. Hope you have a great day. Remember, stay informed, get involved.
Have a beautiful Sunday.
This is a Local 10 editorial with WPLG President Bert Medina.
In April 2016, Local 10 launched My Future, My Choice, a multi-year, multifaceted initiative to address youth gun violence and help pave a way to solutions. We understand that education is key to a young person's success, and that is why, as part of this initiative, we introduced Local 10's Big Book Drive. Research shows that an alarming number of children who failed to graduate from high school were poor third-grade readers. And in low-income neighborhoods, the number of books is 1 for every 300 children. And so, from now through May 19, we will be collecting new books at Miami-Dade, Broward, and Monroe County Public Libraries. Last year, thanks to you, we collected 24,000 books. So this year, our goal is to collect 100,000 books. And in doing so, we will impact 100,000 lives. For more information, including a list of age-appropriate books, go to local10.com. We can make a difference, one book at a time. Of course, this is only the beginning of the conversation. Let's continue it on local10.com.
This has been a Local 10 editorial. We encourage the presentation of contrasting points of view.